Hello, everyone. Friday Night Live. How are you doing? We have our very special returning guest, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Doc, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Good,
Well,
good,
you know
good.
you know the story I gave you earlier. Yeah, I'm good.
Good, 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 good. Well, we're definitely living in a world that is changing before our eyes. And I thought, Rick, what I'd like to bring out here is something that I am finding, and I want to get your take on this because I think you would be the right person to do that. So give me 1 second while I pull this up here. There we go.
No, to smoke on camera.
Well, I don't know if in some states that's legal or not, but I'm sure that you can do whatever you want to do in your home.
Thank you.
So,
well, it's legal here, and that's that. So when I've been doing this since '70, when it was illegal.
well, it's about to be legal up in Canada. So, Rick, focusing in on something that is really starting to become more of an issue. I have.
I see what you're going for. Okay, I can talk about this.
Good. Because see, I have two friends that are actually pilots. I won't tell which airlines they work for. And what I am hearing is something that is alarming them, is this increase in what they call background ionization radiation. There's this story. I just want to show you what has been pulled up here in the last couple. Here's one that I found. What air crews should know about their occupational exposure to ionizing radiation. And what got me on this one was they showed the galactic cosmic radiation and along with the solar particle radiation.
Okay. Yep.
Now, one other one for you. Here's the CDC putting out an alert on cosmic ionization radiation.
We have an atmospheric change happening, and
the
sun is in a solar minimum right now. This Earth does not. Let's do some metaphor here. The Earth does not circle the sun. What it does is the sun is like a comet going meow through space, and the Earth is in a helix following it. Period. Going around it.
So it's a corkscrew, right?
That's right.
Okay, that could be that. You know, Rick, what's
I'm trying to catch up. You know the whole thing, and because the sun is turning, and because there's some other things going on, the Earth will wobble a little bit. Now, during a solar minimum, the crap that the sun goes through is not being absorbed by the sun; it's going around the sun, and so it's hitting Earth. Okay. That's what happens in a solar minimum. Now, basically, that's a menage of your spice cabinet. You know, a little bit of this and a lot of that, and some more of this, and you throw it in. You have you got to remove the bay leaf, you know, out of the stew. And, what's happening is that the Earth now is being hit with a lot more arbitrary garbage that it would normally not enjoy because of the sun's solar minimum. The sun used to be thought of as a giant thermonuclear fusion. It's not. A better model today is that it's electric. And once you look at it as electric, then the solar minimum, you understand it. And the Earth is the same way. Even though we have a molten core, it's a plasma. And because it's a plasma, it absorbs these particles during solar minimums and gains mass. And the Earth is now 60% larger than it was back in Noah's time in the flood.
Now, you bring up a very good point because I've done a video on the expanding Earth. In fact, what I just read in
egotistical expansion. Yeah.
So it seems to be it's happening in the whole solar system.
Oh yeah, everything's gaining mass. The Earth. Now, what that will do to things like tsunamis is make them less. They're not going to be quite as violent. They'll be a little more shaky-dooky, that kind of thing. However, what it is going to do is it's also going to absorb this crap into the Earth, and it's going to change things, including the Van Allen belt. Now, originally the Van Allen belt and this atmosphere, this cushion that we have between outer space and because space isn't empty at all, man. It's got a lot of shit in it.
Yeah, it does.
Well, it's just a soup of stuff. Imagine, and we're out here on the rim. Imagine what it would have been like if we'd been down in galactic center in our galaxy. You know how tight it is down there. Probably that's where black goo comes from as a life form. I don't know. What I do know is that we are seeing a lot more black goof or black fungus everywhere in the forests, on marble, like Statue of Liberty and in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I've actually heard that it's actually changing. What did I read? That it's attacking what is it, limestone, I believe.
That's right. And so it's everywhere. And, you know, you can go in there with a toothbrush and try to dig it out, but it digs in like an Alabama tick. And why don't you know what it's doing to your lungs and relate it. Now, with all of that, it changes the atmospheric's ability to absorb these things before they hit the earth. And so while man is now enjoying UVBs, where you have to have a special, you can't be on.
Yes, yeah. A lot of people don't know that now.
Well, yeah, they do, because we're talking about it. And the fact if we're talking about it, everybody is. So there it is. But you have to have special screens now, and you can't be out in the sun more than a couple of minutes, or it'll start to cause cancer-like blotches and skin tags and all that kind of creepy stuff that goes on with mistakes that happen in the body when gamma rays hit them and other kinds of weird neutrinos and, you know, all kinds of things going around. Big soup. Now, with that said, the 5G towers and the smart meters and all our cell phones and our technologies, plural, are all going toward charging your battery in the air. You know.
By the way, can I just break in here? You get this, folks. The CEO, and I forget which software company was in Japan. Folks, get this. His cell phone, when he plugged it in to charge, as it was charging, it exploded. Now, Rick, I have a theory I want to run by you on this. As I told my wife, I said, you know what I think's happening? I think because, number one, on Tuesday, we measured the lowest speed of the solar wind that had been recorded, and the solar wind was below 200,000 kilometers per second.
That's what's happening to the pilot. See, that is what's causing their being exposed to extra radiation that they would not have otherwise enjoyed. And Kilauea is an example of the magma forms that are coming out of it right now will show that it's not normal.
And by the way, Rick, did you hear that the magma coming out, folks? Get this. It is the magma that was present in the last magnetic pole reversal.
Well, that's what's happening. That's where I was going. The actual your actual compasses now start spinning. They do all of that, and so we are going to have a magnetic field shift. And when we do, well, that will cause an interesting day after tomorrow. It won't last very long, but everything from 10 feet above, you know, the first 10 feet of frost line is going to be sterile, because when we're talking about going down below 100, minus 100 Fahrenheit, you start losing mycorrhizae, mycelium, other kinds of things that make the soil alive. And so we're going to have a situation where my strong recommendation, like what Canada does now, is instead of their repositories, instead of them doing gold, you know, they do seed, just like the big seed things, because all the seed in the soil, your weeds and all of that, are all be dead. Folks, in the woods.
This is no BS, folks. This is the military handbook that does exactly that. It is literally a step by step. I'd recommend people start understanding what's around them, begin to start learning the fauna. Anyway, go on, Rick, because I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I know both of those authors, by the way. mine is called Native Plants of Commercial.
Exactly. And folks, I've left the link. Go and get Dr. Miller's books.
The thing is that this whole thing is why there is a move now to learn how to grow vertical aquaculture, underground, closed systems. I'm working with a group at North American Sustainable Farm, NASF.life. Check that out. You might pull that up. You'll see I'm doing interviews on Michael Rousey and other kinds of teaching online courses with them.
Yes.
I'm concerned about being able to grow anything on the surface of the earth.
Thank you.
So my farming direction now with sustainable lifeboats is moving towards terrariums, closed systems where you don't have to go outside to get your minerals or nutrient. It's a closed system. And the way we did that with Lunar Base Alpha 1 in 1970, so I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
Well, 45 years, 47 years.
And by the way, you don't look a day over 45.
Yeah, they do done that, man. I wish the girls thought that, man. Bob,
hey, let me tell you now, some women find you very sexy. So, listen.
How did he put it in laughing? Oh, yeah. All men in love.
Anyway, we digress. Back onto the topic. You see, let me just say this. We used to grow a beautiful garden here in Colorado. The last couple of... Pardon?
Where?
I'm right in the Denver area.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm southwest of Denver. So we used to be able to grow beautiful tomatoes, the type of vegetables, Last year, the radiation burns were so bad and stunted. Well, thank you, Brian. Much love. The tea is on me. All right. That
my margarita waits for me.
Yeah, exactly. We just gave up. It was like
what the pilots are experiencing, and there we are, full circle. You're noticing it on everything. How the farmer first noted this change last year is not on people, but on the flies, on cow shit. In your barnyard. And you have a pigsty. There's less flies. The ant life, and this is in the Midwest now. It's completely gone.
By the way, I want to testify to what this man is saying. My neighbor has a big dog, and sometimes they don't pick up the stuff. And in years past, it was a problem because I keep my garage door, and the flies would come in droves. Let me tell you something that I haven't seen this year, Rick. We have seen very few flies at all.
UVBs, that's what it is, the longer wavelengths. And that is what is causing problems with airline flights that are extended up that high. You don't have the shielding, and you don't think that skin on an aircraft is going to cry and knock down. No. We got some problems. And so flying, this was known 10 years ago, but it's now becoming to the point where you need a dosimetry badge. And by the way, the measurement is called LD50 ratio. That means with this exposure, 50% humans die. LD50 ratio.
So can we also now begin to extrapolate further from that? Is that because I am contending what they're hiding from us is that we're seeing the rapid deterioration of our DNA as a species.
Yeah, we can go there too. What's actually happened? There's several processes. Of course, we were manufactured and we are being manipulated by something, God, I don't know, that is causing changes. Try out rhesus negative, your fourth genome in the blood. What's that about? What makes that different than the Dalai Lama that does have access to his memories? And, a little Buddha. And it's so nice to see you again after so long a period.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk about reincarnation and the distinction of getting off the wheel. But what is happening is that we're changing. And we have more indigo kids that are like the millenniums. They're extremely bright. I mean, really, way better than normal children.
Would you say that this is a result of the DNA that's mutating?
Individual parents might want to think so. Look at my boy, at Waldorf and what he's doing in homeschool.
Sure.
But it is a genetic thing that's happening. How did David Bowie put it? Here, let me show you. He takes the contact eye at the end of the movie to show the woman he's an alien. And he's got two different colored eyes. There is something else going on, and it's not.
Mr. Floyd, thank you.
What?
Just people in the chat room.
Oh, they're enjoying
the donation. Yeah.
Must be nice, man. Where's mine? Okay. Really.
I'll tell you what, we'll send it on your way.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm serious.
That's what I'm talking about. That's next with the teleportation laser.
So I'd like to stay on this thing that what we're seeing to us is this mutation. And I contend that it's it's evolving our species into a place that we had not anticipated.
The moment. Well, that's it. God is that which cannot be known. You can only experience him. Now, if you use that, it's an assumed truth. Like you can't imagine it. No matter how good your imagination is, it's beyond your ability. Now you enter the realm of angels and gods. And from that perspective, and Solomon the King used to write about the greater and lesser keys of Solomon. And the greater keys were about angels and angelic beings. And that's where John Dee came in with the Enochian, the angelic languages, of the trapezoid or whatever. Right. But okay, now what's going on is that there's going to be changes that we've got historical records of cycles that we've gone through. The Clovis, for example, crawled out of a cave and they had spaceflight. You go to the Cave of Dreams in France, and you can look at star maps on the cows, and you go further south down toward Croatia, and they have the same star maps in those caves that are in reverse, which means seeing from space. We've been here before. It means we are about to have a massive change. Now, you can have a glass half full or a half empty. And, we can doom and gloom, or we could consider this an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, once you do that, what you're limited by is your imagination of the person, because imagination is reality. If that's a truism, which I don't know, it's just a postulate, theorem. Now I could, with my own mind, change the movie. Holographic concept. That's the book I'm writing right now. That's the thing you did last time we interviewed. That was the idea of a reality. It's the illusion of reality. It isn't real. What's real is something else. And that place has to do with going from the profane into the sacred. And the sacred is timeless, just like Carl Sagan did it in Contact. Timeless. That's where the aliens are. They're not in time. They're out of that construct of realities. And that's where the multiverse comes in, and the new math, which is knot theory over string. You have superstring and and 11 dimensions. And then you start to do things with strings, like tie knots in them, bowling, slip knot,
Mm-hmm.
And all of its geometry. That's where the numbers begin to have more than just numbers. And it's a resonant cavity oscillation with biological and other forms of amplification. And I'm seeing it even in the earth with mycorrhizae. I did a story on that, a class on mycorrhizae, and just showed that it was no different than our gut. And our gut is outside space-time, whereas the brain we normally associate with the mind is actually the tool to make all your beliefs true. I would have seen it if I hadn't believed it. How did they put it in the Midwest? Oh, yeah. Jesus said it. I believe it. then that's that.
I often say,
well,
when you begin to say that it's absolute truth, remember that there's two sides to truth. You're hoping you're on the right one. When you say the end of space-time, and now listen, folks, we didn't plan this show ahead of time, but look at where we're going. So Rick found this article, and it is most interesting that...
Who wrote it?
Let's see. This actually comes from a guy by the name of Kirk Kaggle.
Kaggle. Yeah.
And
you do a due diligence, give me a website. I'll find out who he is.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to send it to you.
But see, I live in a very isolated thing. I'm up here in the middle of nowhere, and Grants Pass. I'm up in the mountains. Oh yeah, I got rail guns.
As the audience knows, last time you also don't wear pants, so it. But the point coming back,
you know what I mean? You can do what you want to do and not worry about a neighbor.
Exactly. I mean, in fact, I think only the really intelligent people are the ones who don't wear pants. I mean, that's just my take on that.
Well, we've got nudist college. I don't do that. But,
yeah. So getting back to really what's happening here. So I look at it in three possible ways, is that we're seeing a transmutation, a transition, or we are actually trans-evolving.
Well, all of that's true because you already thought about it. And the very fact that it was in your mind's eye as a possibility, that was Merlin. When he said to Arthur, anything not specifically forbidden is mandatory. That's what the multiverse is about. The idea that if it's possible, you can count on it.
Interesting.
Now, with that said, you and I are actually closed systems, and your universes are quite different than mine.
Yes.
And when we interface like we are right now, we like, and I would use vessel functions on this one.
That says the day I was writing, I'm telling you, I'm getting this, Rick, more and more. I'm trapped. I sense that I'm trapped.
At all, man. Don't say as soon as you said that, then you are.
Well, no, but it hit me while I was in the shower. Well, I get it. I get it. But there can also be an exit to
this woman. No, I'm not here.
Yeah. So the point is, it was an impression that was very distinct. So anyway.
Yeah. That's because your higher feminine self is having a role of rooster in matriarchal form. Androgyny. I'm going to recommend for you now a book by June Singer called
I've heard her.
Androgyny. June Singer. She's a young psychotherapist.
Yeah.
And to begin that understanding of what the 38 different genders are really all about or not.
By the way, Matt wants you to explain.
I've ever heard, man.
Hey, Rick, we got someone in the chat room that says, please explain how to escape a closed system.
Step outside the box. Just like
if that's how, then I've mastered that, brother. I got that down pat.
I know exactly what you do. Like the Jesuits, they used to whip. Just a whip, and that's how they got out of that closed system. And then the church got all freaked out and hung them.
Well, there you go. I mean, God forbid we can't allow free thought.
Yeah, well, that's it. And the weirdest chat rooms are going to be the ones that go weird and ballistic. The Bible, if you look at it under certain ways, is actually a book on physics.
I had a Jewish rabbi tell me
in entropy, it went there. Now I'm going to go second. I have seen and have videos from the 30s that they thought were lost. They weren't. Of that guy that went up into Nepal, and Tibetan Buddhists brought out these big long horns like they use in the Alps, and they did them in a certain geometry, and they were able to move rocks. That's the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation.
I got it right over here.
The Bible is talking about the difference between physics and religion. It's kind of like the two brains I have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, science and religion. And what you really have is that bottleneck between the two called the moment. Oh, and here I'm going to show you what I mean by all of that.
And we hope he's wearing pads, folks.
Well, I don't know wearing pants. They're just like in the movie.
I love this.
You watch The Worm or Boris, and now you understand what's going on with the mind.
Mm-hmm.
The mind itself.
Well, that's also infinity.
Well, yeah.
When you turn it on its side, that's what I saw.
Okay, and then you had George Gamow and the hierarchy of infinities. Infinities within infinities. That's a book from the 50s that is a very useful text. George Gamow was one of my teachers when I was a little kid looking under microscopes, and he talked about the different subsets of infinities. The rational numbers, real numbers, irrational numbers, blah, 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 blah.
Can I ask a question, sir? Yeah. You're a brilliant mind. All right. So we're talking about infinity, right? Infinities of infinities. Let me finish. So, but in a realm where space-time does not exist, infinity doesn't exist.
Oh, now you're getting smart pills.
Thank you, sir. I practice a lot.
You see, you start in all processes, you start with assumed truths, and then you have some definitions. And so let's do one. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
Correct.
No, now we know about tunneling and the getting, where you can go through space because you don't go, straight. And so the shortest distance is no longer a straight line. Oh, well, if that's true as an assumption, and it is, with black and white holes and Stephen Hawking, there we are, then you can, with the right mathematics, show that the Earth's flat.
Mm-hmm. No, I get it.
Or centered in the center of the universe, or a little dot out there in the orb somewhere. It's actually all of it. Now, with that said, what would you like it to be? Now, when you choose one system, the Earth's flat. Now you have set up a series of realities that are available and those that are not available with those assumptions. And what you do is you test them. Now, if this doesn't work, because this data that we have on the neutrino doesn't fit that, so it's got to be that we're around. No, wait, no, there's no such thing as gravity. Let's see. The Earth sucks. Oh, no, that's a graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
Let me walk you right through that little word. Yeah, but there's no such thing as gravity. Today, we're going to say that the Earth just sucks. It's
Rick, can I ask you a question? Because I had a lot of people try to draw me into the flat Earth. Here's my question.
I know, isn't it weird?
All right. So if I look at a plane, a straight plane, in a three-dimensional environment, it cannot be a flat plane.
That's right. Exactly. And or a four-dimensional or five-dimensional. And guess what happens next? That's why.
Relax, calm down now. Don't stress. Take it easy.
All right. So, because we just got some people probably going, well, he just said that there's no such thing as a flat Earth. No, what I'm saying is that a plane, how does it exist? See, there we go. I love it.
He brought his pistol. He puts holy water in it. But I most likely like what is it? Ammonia. Great.
Exactly.
And
so
that stops the rabbit dog.
Now, but that's how I see things. I mean, how can you have a flat plane?
The reason that we have models of how it's working is so that we can do things we couldn't do in the model we had previous.
Correct.
Okay, so Heisenberg showed how we didn't want to use quantum mechanics as a quantum computation concepts of taking analog into digital, quantum universe, because the more you know about one thing, the less you know about something else. So instead of working with space-time, we're going to work with information and resolution of information, holographic systems. Now, that's physical plane, emotional plane, causal plane, archetypal plane, walrus guy. I am the walrus. You are me, and I that plays.
Great album, by the way.
Beyond that, now that is Timothy Leary.
Yeah.
And these are models that allow. Oh, isn't it interesting that even out of the Upanishads, they had 8 jhana states, or states of higher states of consciousness. That's John Curtis Gowan. You want to go to Trans Art and Creativity at Northridge, and teaches on the development of the psychedelic individual. That was written in the 70s.
By the way, Rick, I recently just read a therapist who's postulating that those who have taken LSD, we've never came back from the dimensions that we entered.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So the the fact is that when you look at the multiverse, that now you can see potentially what this individual was theorizing is that when you expand into psychedelics, it begins to open up new dimensions of thought, et cetera, that many of us never, we actually, we're still there.
Cracker Jacks.
So what do you think on that? What do you think?
Now,
what do you think?
With that, here's the deal. Basically, psychedelics and this century, this millennia, the millenniums, they are using ayahuasca. We did LSD.
We did, yeah.
Before that was opiate. Before opiates, Tombstone, and then they're like, being in yellows, but sedatives. There's all classes of kinds of drugs, but basically, your brain's 8 neurologic circuits are higher forms of these drugs, like dimethyltryptamine is N, and hyphen dimethyltryptamine, the chill that goes up your back. Mm-hmm. Now you can jumpstart your brain's production of lysergic acid amide by taking LSD, which is lysergic acid diethylamide. The body goes, and it's because it's a toxin.
Yeah, it is.
I studied with Bill Osley. He's the one that taught me how to make it. And I can tell you that it's broken down into the salts and in the urine within 20 minutes. And the next 20 hours of hallucinations are a direct result of your own brain's production of these lookalike chemistries. And now, these are tools that's an extension. Like, wham, and you're all of a sudden you're now ready to do the next level of evolution. And that is what, but like all shortcuts to grandma's house, there are big bad wolves. Buyer beware. Is that the right way to do it? Yeah, you need to have breadcrumbs.
It's odd that you use it. I use that expression today talking to someone. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, so you always have a way back home. That is what distinguishes the thread from the distinction of astral projection over remote viewing. Remote viewing, looking through something else's eyes, whereas astral projection has a cord, and that's Monroe versus Reagan, or Radin, and some of the others down there, Targ. That, by the way, didn't even start those researches until the 80s at SRI. Do
you think that there's foundation to that thought, though, that the fact that, because I participated in a government program that...
I bet you did.
Yeah, I did. And, there was 10 of us. There ended up only being 8 because 2 dropped out. But, we were...
window or just...
No, the experiments that we were doing, they were teaching us rational cognitive thought process. And while you're tripping...
Was that Travis Stock verbiage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. James
and then they actually taught us techniques for transcendental meditation.
Yeah. TM?
Yeah. Pardon?
Were you levitate?
I went places that and I can tell you, you would call them today our handlers. There was three of them that would basically guide us through the experience. And
I'd hammer in the morning. I would.
well, it was very interesting. I mean, I went places that most people don't go.
I went to a place once. My first trip with LSD in '64 with Tim Leary. I was part of a study out of Harvard, Yale. Where was it? Harvard, I guess it was. And Tim talked to my mom. Then he went to Washington State because I was 20.
Okay.
20 years old, and I had no idea what pot was. I was a nerd, doing my little linear accelerators and plasma jets, and yeah, I was that guy. And
the fourth state of matter, nothing big deal about that.
So they wanted to see what would happen to me, and so here I am at Deception Pass at Hurricane Ridge, looking 2,000 feet down into Puget Sound down there up near Tatoosh Island, and water peeling back colors, and Leary leans over and he says, "Wouldn't it be neat to jump?" What? And that's when I discovered all the Slexley and the doors of perception, and came to the deep realization that inner space inside here is more vast than outer space. That is light years, and it's nothing. The possibilities, and that's called five space. There are a bunch more spaces up there, but guess what? Five spaces, sliders, where you have all possibilities. Reincarnation, the white tube that Kubler-Ross talks about, or proof of heaven.
So that you call that the five space?
Five space. Your brain.
Okay.
Your DNA. Okay, let's start with your DNA. Your DNA, three-dimensional helix structure, is a three-dimensional hologram of four space. Four spaces. Length, girth, and width and time. Who you are, who you were, who you are, and who you will be. Contains that genetics of that moment. The brain, big crystal up here, down here, and all the rest of it, big crystal up here, is a four-dimensional hologram, amorphous semiconductor. At any given moment, it's changing. It doesn't change. It's not holding three dimensions. Constantly changing.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So it's a four-dimensional hologram, five space, and that's the premise of me saying, "Oh, then that means if I can go to different places in my brain, I can change the movie." And the way you do that is the release of more than one, because that's called in Jungian psychology either being possessed, or complexed, where you have one or more stories going on. And that's the new book I'm coming out with, called The Magical and Ritual Use of Metaphor. It's got 22 chapters. It uses a Greek pantheon, and is my book of thought. And 22 stories in the big city.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's from the Tree of Life. I'm using Leary's 8 neurotransmitters as a complex for the diamond body, like Carl Sagan used, as a launch point going into time and space where I can change the movie. It turns out all the saints in history have stressed the importance of meditation training the mind.
Yeah.
And it takes 30, 40 years. And like taking drugs, shortcuts to grandma's house, you can use brain drivers, which will get you to meditative states within 3 years, using brain drivers and frequency following function, some of these power tools that I talk about. But with them come the lessons not as well learned, which means they also require reinforcement, and they take a lot more care, because at that moment you're in serious risk because you're out on the rim where big bad wolves appear.
Sure.
Okay, you're in the more rarefied form of making yourself change. And with that comes the responsibility of what that implies. And so it takes a very strong mind to be able to integrate, that's a good word, integrate that experience and move to the next level of awareness. And that's what John Curtis Gowan talks about. I used his book for 6 of 9 years I taught shamanism at the UW and at Evergreen. And John Curtis Gowan is trance, art, and creativity. It's prototaxic, parataxic, and syntactic modes of consciousness. In other words, it is your will that determines what your purpose is.
Two things. I want to share this with you. When you were talking, I'm getting this hologram. Rick, the hologram exists in each one of us that is then connected to each other. This is what forms that grid. I mean, that's what I'm getting.
Well, that's the fourth, the holographic level of awareness and neurologic circuits. And then there's the reflected ones that lead to the very top one, which is ketamine. And they're not ketamine or special K, but ketamine is the highest function that in terms of his hierarchy. And that's all discussed in workbook 1 of my power tools sections. That's the 8 neurologic circuits of Timothy Leary. And I use them as tarot cards because what I'm doing is trying to line my writings up so you know where to place it in the scheme of things, like you did when Crowley wrote Liber 34.
You see, and it's happening to me. You see all the post-it notes? The thoughts are coming in so fast that I don't have enough whiteboards. And so there's a question in the chat room.
Sure.
Brian Jacobson wants to know, do our bodies break down and reconstruct like 20,000 times per second? Here, it's pretty noticeable if you are taking heavy doses of Ormus.
That was an Egyptian thing with Sir Lawrence Gardner. Yeah, good luck with that. Where I do cordyceps, I'm using oxygen, and am I getting, what were we talking about?
We're talking about, does the body actually break down?
Gotcha. So, we're losing something at the same time we gain something. Now, here's the bad news about information. You can't get there from here with information.
Yeah, I'm learning that.
Well, that's why Castaneda called it illusion. Because guess what? Knowledge is anything you want it to be.
Yeah.
And it's true for that subset or universe or ways of looking at things, including the distinction between Emmanuel's teachings of the Essene Gospels and Jesus Christ of the Catholic Church. And well, I'm gonna draw some sword here. Christ may have been an alien. Who knows? But one thing is true: in order to be the king of Jerusalem by canon law, he had to have heirs, and that was what the Cathars were when Mary fled to the south of France. And it was in the year 1000 when Pope Innocent I declared war on the Cathars that the bloodlines of Christ and teachings of Christ and the Catholic Church departed ways and going in opposite directions. To have the need of a priest to talk to God on my behalf is a bunch of BS.
Well, let me tell you what.
I mean, that's it.
War.
And I am a Jesuit. That means I am the science part of the church, and the church used to be the science. That's what I meant by inferring the Bible. It was a book of physics, if you look at it that way. And when there was a distinction made in the cavitation process of science and religion, now what you have is a balance between the two that is the center of the moment and the noodle and the place where it's beyond you. And that's where God steps in and you experience him. Now, when you experience that moment, that is called the sacred. And that place is very rare and is where all...
You see, I like to be inclusive, Rick. We have a lot of Hindus, we have a lot of Muslims, a lot of Jewish people. So I listen, I'm not a Christian. I left that religion. I denounced it. And my position is this: I don't need a religion. The God that I serve doesn't need worshipers, and it isn't a he. He's not of a gene, of a sex. So anyway, but
what the Greek did is they broke them down into 22 individual stories in the big city. And those are the length, girth, and width of man. And so if you're a psyche at the Well of Souls, you know, what's going to happen? Well, that has an ending story. And because it's complex, you have 3 of these different stories or more going on inside you, and you are manipulating through this kind of space with these so-called wounds or tools.
I used to meditate on the goal. That's the Jewish concept, the House of Souls.
Well, and of course, that's structured water in a microtubule called chi. But
see?
I think there's something more going on here, and that these wounds that we're given, you know, working that create intent over a purpose, they are actually blessings. Let me.
Interesting.
Well, no. If you can containerize water, Bruce Lee, become like water. Yeah. But when you put it in a cup, it's different. And that means you've containerized it. Okay, if you can containerize the wound, now what the Greek did is they containerized it into 22 different kinds of shapes.
See, that's very interesting.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
They did it all these different shapes because this one, Athena, is intelligence, and Artemis, twang, you know, is got a different relationship and story and ending. And if these are, you're either possessed, you have one god working through you, or you're complex. You got a bunch of them.
I'm going to be the complex guy. I'm going to go with polytheism.
So what you need to do then, in path working, this is a form of magic. It's a type of science. It is, that's what L. Ron Hubbard thought. And I am the physicist that didn't blow himself up. Jack Corp started, what is it, JPL? And,
yeah.
Well, why would I start, man?
I love it.
Now, wait a minute. The thing is, if you can containerize these wounds, like let's say anger, you know, deadly sin, anger. Yeah, you don't want anger. Well, yeah, anger is how I can do a floor better than you can. I can clean a floor. I can take that anger and I can do things people can't do otherwise. And so that has an energy to it.
Sure it does.
If it's containerized correctly, like I'm not going to lay it on you, you know, I'm going to rip your lawn. I'm going to.
So we're talking the Ghostbusters goo.
Black mold, yeah, there you go. Goo.
I'm going to get some Aretha Franklin going here.
You know, and so the chat room can have fun with all of this because that's what the tarot was originally about, is containerizing the various stories that we have going on archetypally on the 4th level. And right at the 4th level, going to the 5th level, is like going from one side of the infinity to the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like from one side and the very thin line of there right at that moment to the other.
Wouldn't we call that the singularity?
Well, or 0 point energy, how big is the thing?
Yeah, because when I see the point, there comes a point at 2 when the 2 intersect. I mean, that's a far out place to be.
That even on a quantum mechanical level, that's the whole concept of into the out of, that is called fusion.
Yeah. And that's what I was seeing about water. Water within itself is fusion.
Well, see, that's it. Yeah, and it's the first molecule paranortha that has some isotopes, deuterium, tritium, and has some phases to it. Won't freeze at 100 minus 100 on Mars because there's no pressure, Boyle's law. Or there's, you sent me a note. I should be looking at that. Are we getting Letty on time?
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. Who else is in here?
Oh, okay, good. I'm good. How do dreams come into reality of all of this? Well, dreams. See, dream states may actually be more real than consciousness. And there are many Aborigine tribes, including the Tabayander, the Hopi, the Aborigines. They believe that dream time has more content than consciousness does. Now, that's what consciousness is and what it is not. Information. When I said you can't get there, you remember I said when you go from an analog to digital system, you also set up its limitations. You know, the more you know about one thing, the less you know about the other. Heisenberg. So you come into information and resolution of information like a fractal. And what happens next is we have a theorem in information theory that states if you have enough information to ask a coherent question, you have enough information to answer it. The structure of the way you ask the question is the answer. And that is the short learnings of it is the more you know, the more questions you have.
See?
You can't get there from here. And so information isn't also necessary. There's only one place where information has a role in consciousness, and that's in middle pillar, going from, not Tipperith, Christ consciousness, to God consciousness, Tipperith and Kether. In the middle, big long middle pillar, high priestess, there's a missing Sephiroth that has a dot, it's dotted, and it's in the middle of the Sea of Karansan or chaos. It's called Doth, D-A-A-T-H, not death, Doth. And Doth is that rock under the raging river that you don't know about, that I leap out into the raging river, touch briefly on the rock to leap over to the other side. That's what Doth is. That is what information is useful for. It is knowledge through wisdom, and it's a temporary place. And you use it briefly because none of it's true. It's all real.
By the way, I'm writing a book, and I'm just come to a chapter that I'm writing. And so I've been getting downloads, Rick, that death, and I thought more about this when Charles Krauthammer passed away yesterday. And I liked Charles. I liked his writing. I liked his idealism. But my point is this: Charles, as a quadriplegic, was very much interested in death. In fact, his closest friend says that he spoke about it all the time. And I understand what Charles is talking about. Today, I became aware, some of us, death is actually a reunion. You see, I got a sense that there is a part of me that is yet out there that's waiting for this part of my consciousness experiencing this to come back home.
Well, that's that movie, all that jazz, and it's showtime.
But I mean, no, I'm seriously looking at that.
That's what you're discussing. The other 9/10 of your cerebral cortex.
Okay.
That place is where you and God, you feel like you're merging with God. You're not. That's only halfway. Believe it or not, it's the
I don't know. And this is just where I'm at right now in this path on my journey, Rick. I'm not sure that, you see, I don't think it ever ends. If the infinite being, which I do believe exists, I believe the concept of that infinite being can be summarized in one word: thought. It had to be thought. Without thought present, nothing else would exist.
Imagine what thought is as a drop of water pushing against a pool of water. Poip. And what happens next is there are ripples going to the magnosphere, the future. Waves that go inward form a ball, and a ball of water, that drop of water pops back up again, but it is no longer a drop of water. It is a bubble that has captured the medium in which it fell, and it has a very special kind of water surrounding H3O2, which is called exclusion zone water. And the inside medium that it drops is in a cavitation process of going into the out of as a torus. And that is Sir Roger Penrose's concept of torus twister space to be distinguished differently than Hawking's white and black hole. However, the two of them wrote a book together on the cosmos of the universe: point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. And at the end of the Look, point. They were the same thing, because it doesn't matter how you choose to look at it. Your choice determines what you can and cannot do. And so magic is where you use various altered states, not conscious state, but other states, dream states, as tools in a toolbox for the next stage in the evolution of man.
Thank you. By the way, there's a question from Cynthia Gregg who asks, does he think thought connected to the heart sent out to the universe, is that becoming as one?
You probably, because you think it is, you would like
it. Okay.
Kumbaya. But the love, actually, this is very important lesson now. It comes from the Greek word gimel. Gimel is 5. It's G. Gimel is the camel. It is L, 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 L. It's like a track in the desert for light, life, love, liberty, and law. Now, love, I always have to go back to, what's love got to do with it? Right? Wait a minute, man. It's more like love. The Greek had 3 words for love. There was eros, philo, agape, and then Aleister Crowley added a 4th one, which is will. And that's telema, or will, which is your purpose here. And now we're discovering with information theory that with intent, wounding and a 3rd generation D-Wave technology can absolutely know what you're going to do 28 minutes before you do. However, it turns out that it can't go into purpose. And because that's what Crowley says, when you're doing your true will, none shall say nay. You're not in conflict with anything. You are in the moment. And when you're in the moment, that sacredness place of experiencing God, none shall say nay, and you end up doing why you came here. And the wounds that you received, and they're different for each of us. Someone cheated on me, and then I went that way. And beware of the dark force, dark side, Luke. And how did Han Solo put it? Hey, it's me. I'll get through this. You got to love the Beatles, man. Everything turns out in the end. Things aren't turning out. It's not yet the end.
So let me ask you, everything that, as I continue to pursue philosophy, and I love philosophy, it expands one's awareness of the multiplicity.
You can do it.
Yeah, it's a passion, it's a hunger within me. And the more,
that's what they call inflammement, by the way. Man on fire. How could you not do it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
inflamed.
And I keep on thinking about the philosophy of man, and it's all centered on man. I'm looking for the day when I can interact with beings that will bring to our consciousness, that would integrate our religious ideologies, our dogmas, our philosophies, our sciences into a higher state of consciousness that would include other consciousness besides our own.
Well, what do you mean we, white man?
Well, that's exactly what I mean, cowboy.
I'm going
I'm like, Tano, what the hell do you mean, white man? I'm out of here.
That was Tano's Expanding Headband by Marlowe and Cecil, the first electronic music. Now,
okay. But do you see where I'm coming from? I mean, I'm very serious. This is a pursuit of mine.
We are, each of us, a closed system, like an entropy that you're talking about. And your religion and science are quite different than mine.
Yes. Yeah.
Your imagination and your wounds, your gifts, the blessings that God gave you at this moment. The Buddhist forms from a previous epoch go even further than the Upanishads with Voice of the Silence and the Essene Gospels that Christ taught manual. They go back into the Buddhist forms. Probably that spacecraft that's crashed on the other side of the moon was probably a Buddhist one, because I've seen them.
Convinced that you're right on that. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's a metaphor.
Well, no, but I happen to think that that's where they were. In fact, I think what they wrote.
You had to have a staging area when you came to Earth from Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, Mars was where we originated. They were already now developing the genome structures. I think that there's something else going on here, and that the Bordeaux Thadal, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they talk about death. That's where you want to get your next parts of your information. Read the Bordeaux Thadal, and there are several translations. Evan Wentz, there's a couple of them. I studied with Wilhelm Reich, not
Okay.
Wilhelm, no, Helmut Wilhelm. Helmut Wilhelm, I studied Tibetan Book of the Dead at the University of Washington when he did his 8 lectures on the I Ching. And Helmut Wilhelm was the son of Wilhelm and Baines that wrote, the I Ching and translations. The Bordeaux Thadal talks about choices that man has at any given moment, and that we're flagships, in a multiverse with our own closed systems of universes. And that when we interface with each other and we pollinate each other, like flowers, that your universes take on some of my concepts and mine do yours. I've seen that even in my teaching. I actually learn more from teaching because of what I learned from my students.
Sure.
I'm not kidding. I mean, that's exactly, it's the students.
Well, what I find unique about each one of us, where my wife works, she sees death quite often. Yeah. And the fact that what we were talking about is that we see what she does, and she comes back and tells me, because I'm asking her these questions, is that there's 2 types of individuals. When that moment comes, there are those who have this will to live that supersedes even death itself. Now, she's also witnessed those who, get this, folks, will to die. She has actually seen the transformation take place in less than 24 hours. When a person decides the will to die, they go.
So Kubler-Ross talks about a lot of this. She's someone you might want to also read. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross,
Okay.
Contemporary with James Hillman. She's brilliant, in my opinion. I find her work very useful in my own physics stuff, because it helps me direct where I would like to have a kind of a universe I'd like to have. With all this change that we talked about earlier, and the Earth changes. And
yeah, because we're going through some changes, no doubt about it.
Well, that's the rule. It has always been about change.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can count on it. Okay, so with that, is it a bad thing or a good thing? Well, like I did before, the minister, says, is the house white or brown? And the correct answer is yes.
Yeah.
Well, then that's it. That's your choice. And so if you choose the tunnel of light, which is described in the Bordeaux Thadal, all your friends and your dog, come on in, the water's fine. That's the birth canal. And out you come for another play. And you keep repeating that.
Not me. I've already been there. I know where I'm going.
And you want to go back to the Lord. That's the blue light.
No.
I have no idea, because I haven't gone down there. I've had a near-death experience. I know about the tunnel. I saw it. So
it's to the left, by the way.
What?
It's to the left.
Yeah.
I'm not bullshitting you. It's not. It's to the left.
Has to do with which is your lead eye. Anyway, I'm kidding.
No, I mean, when you get there.
Left-handed. No. In the right and left brain. And the new adult, that bottleneck where they need to expand.
I think there's a third choice, but I haven't seen that yet.
The third choice, what would that be? To become God? Good luck.
Well, I mean, in an infinite universe of infinite possibilities, the fact that when we cross over, and I think once again, it's a reunion, I sense there's a part of me waiting for me.
Oh yeah,
Nope.
no question. That's it, because that part is outside space-time and allowing this little piece of you, which you call consciousness, to be a little child for a long period of time in your lessons. And at some point, it's time to shit or get off the pot. And you have to train your mind and begin the arduous. But here's the good news. The very fact that I've already done that means that you are going to do that. And it doesn't matter when, it's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean,
you can count on it, because it's already happening. And that's the way you stay focused.
yeah, yeah.
It doesn't mean you're focused, but you're watching now. This like this, not like this. Someone playing a game, but that you're moving your consciousness into a broader sphere of awarenesses. And the woman that asked about love, absolutely, Mom. You stay with that vibe. And what happens next is you go into the next stages of jhana states, or higher states of consciousness that they talk about, cosmic consciousness, from love, eros, philo, and agape, and then love of will. And then you move to the next step, which is up here, the jhana states or higher states of consciousness, ma'am. And then the highest form of love that I'm aware of, it comes from the Quaker, and it's called joy. When you are, like you were talking about, inflamed, you're on fire and you could not do anything but your purpose. And that, in my opinion, is the highest form of love there is. And not brotherly love. These are like chunks, in terms of resolution of information. And the I am you, you are me, I am the walrus. That's that place between infinity, the place in between, right there where the business happens, right there.
It's interesting when you bring that up, joy. I think it's the one thing our species has been deprived of. I don't see it in today's world. I don't know people who could actually define or express joy. Rick? Well, I didn't say you, but when we're in this environment here, we're in a sphere, and I look outside that sphere and I look at the gauge of what the world is doing, and I can tell you the world is one miserable place right now.
Well, it always has been.
Well,
half full, glasses half empty. You have a choice on seeing that.
No, I get it. I fully get that understanding, that distinction, but still the reality is I have friends that are in law enforcement, and they're afraid now for their lives when they get off work. I mean,
you know why? It's a loss of trust. Trust is the bottom line on everything. And we've lost trust in our government. We've lost trust in medicine. We've lost trust in law enforcement. We've lost trust in each other. And we've somehow comes back to what Ducky Mallard said was the distinction between a moral and an ethical man. And an ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife. A moral man won't. And
exactly.
Walk your talk. And even if it's different than mine, that's the glory and diversity of man.
Yes.
To make judgment of, that's not, you do that for yourself, but not for another.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. It's in Muhammad and the ability to tell a lie to an infidel. In my system of seeing, I wouldn't dream of treating him that way, even if he were that way. Why? Because he could aspire to something more.
Yeah, yeah, and that's empathy.
A Buddhist can be a Christian.
Yeah.
A Christian cannot be a Buddhist. Worldviews are what set your limitations on what you can and can't do. And that means they're tools in a toolbox.
Yeah. But my question always to that is God a Christian?
I wouldn't know.
Ah, you see, it's always the small little things that
My God is the god Chrome out of Conan. Doesn't give.
you see that's that and it trip and people get sometimes a little aggravated with me because I said,
So
well,
I went. My girlfriend and I like to go to different churches every Sunday.
I remember you telling me that.
One's on Saturday, and sometimes they're having meetings on Wednesdays. Just like Jehovah's Witnesses or others.
Yep.
And what I discovered, we went to one last week, which was not Unity. It was the other one.
Unitarian?
No.
Presbyterian?
I don't know what it is. It's a metaphysical library. And the lesson that they taught this last week was about gratitude.
Oh.
Grateful.
Yeah.
And they sang these awful songs. And, well, I mean, it's all, hold hands, kumbaya. And I loved it. And I am encouraged with what I see in fellowship happening in my neighborhood. There were only a few churches so far that I've encountered that I would never go back to. Only a couple of them. All the rest of them have good messages.
You never knew my past and when I was in the corporate world, but I developed one of the very first mobile giving apps for churches.
Really?
Oh, yes, back in 2010. And
that's George Carlin.
Pardon?
God has everything. But...
Well, let me tell you something, my friend. When I started meeting with the major ministries of this nation, I didn't find one honest one out there.
No, because it's about business.
No, it's about money.
Really, what religion is truly about.
It's money.
What you want to do is find people that think like you. Moral codes of ethics, rules of conduct. You want to get reinforcement on your values.
I want to tell you a true story, and I won't say the state I was in, but I was doing research on this. And so I was going across the country visiting every type of church I could.
Yeah.
Because I wanted, back in, people don't realize in 2010, we didn't have apps.
Yeah,
you didn't have the phone that we do today. That a smartphone didn't exist.
Yeah.
BlackBerry was one of the more advanced ones that you could get for the security of it. And then along come Apple. But here's the point. I was in one church where the preacher began to tell me, he says, well, I told him what I was developing, and he invited me to his office, and he said, let me tell you how it is. And he opened up his desk, and he said, this book is what I show the church, the board. And then he pulled out on another side of the desk, he says, this book no one sees, because this is the one that really has the real truth. I mean, I worked with the Secret Service in busting churches because we found, I won't get into it. My point was all this.
Their businesses,
Yeah. So when you begin.
Tammy, what was her name? Tammy
Faye. Yeah, Tammy Faye Baker. Yeah. So, when you begin to see this, you see, here's my problem, Rick, and this is the philosophy side. If the beginning is wrong, how can the end be right?
Ends justifying the means. Yeah, that's a really important issue in the distinction between ethics and morals.
Yeah.
And that is the essence of Hobbes and Kant and their arguments of natural and civil law. And I have studied that for myself and know my error bars, my limitations of what I will do, what I won't do, etc. And I try not to have very deep gray area. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I have it pretty cleanly defined. And the nice part is that's the purpose of self-realization, union with self, that person outside space-time, is where you know exactly what you are and what you want to do at that moment. That's when it becomes sacred and you are in touch with your androgyny, that aspect of union. And it's a lower union than God. But
that's at a vibration that we couldn't tolerate.
Well, I came out of the crib talking to myself. I was blessed. I'm very fortunate person in some ways because I know exactly how I feel about something at any given moment. It changes from one moment to another. That's the altered states I'm in terms of wounds and situations and whatever white noise is going on. But purpose is a place where a third generation D wave can't go. And that belongs to you. Or how did Crocodile, that belongs to Mick. Yeah, belongs to Mick.
I like that.
That place, that belongs to Mick.
I'll have to introduce you to a good person I've met, Tony Parvarjanik, Reverend Dr. Tony Parvarjanik. And she was just a delightful person. I'm going to put you two together. She is just, you two would definitely love her. Like each other. Excuse me. Love, I don't know. It's a little strange, a little hard.
Well, we were talking about higher forms.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I think that love in itself is as infinite as thought is. I have seen it all my life.
Organ.
Pardon?
It's a different organ.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
The heart is not the gut.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why they made distinctions in the Upanishads of the chakras.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. There it is. That's why this one woman is working with different rays. Love. There's nothing wrong with it. Very powerful. Mm-hmm. I come in with mine and harmonize with hers, and maybe light, life, love, liberty, and law.
Well, I'm teaching people on this end how to begin to invoke favor upon their enemies.
And you concur moral obligations. That's when the alien, when the president has, the Joker goes up to the alien and says, "Why can't we all just get along?" And here and it's bad.
Yeah. Well, Rick, we have really gone. Before we get out of here, I want to take people over to your website, and folks, go over there. Definitely. Now, do you have a YouTube channel, Rick? You don't, do you?
I do. We just have a brand new YouTube channel, and we've just started. Thank you. Yes, we're just starting. Matt Stein and I are going to be offering videos, training online that you can buy, download, or take with live. I'm going to be doing a series of these up in Canada at the end of September, going into setting up sustainable lifeboats and doing ESP workshops all through Nanaimo, Victoria, Vancouver, BC, Seattle, etc.
Well, folks, this is his website. I've left all the contact information. And, we consider Rick to be kind of like, he's kind of our resident. We've got Dr. Claudia Albers as well. And so, Rick, you are part of the group. I'm just telling you, that's what.
Well, a long ways to go. And I can tell you the Aborigines, even over the Inuit and the Hopi, which are 5,000 and 7,000 years, the Aborigines just had a major conference over in Brisbane. And they're saying it will be between now and 2020 when the shit hits the fan. And it will be 2024 when we come out of it and look back at, oh my God, and there will be blood. The disasters will not be quite as described biblically, and yet there will be massive trauma. The grid went down just 4 days ago here in Oregon for a couple of hours.
Yeah, it's happening all over the world. Again, I talk about these batteries, these ionized batteries that we use in our devices, folks. Rick, I contend that you see the heavy particles bombarding the gamma rays, that this is having a reaction to those batteries.
Well, it's having a reaction to everything, including airline pilots. Yeah. And so, in fact, I wouldn't be an airline pilot anymore. That's almost as bad as being an astronaut. Going into outer space, there's no shielding for this stuff. And that's what our atmosphere does. And now we're noticing it's having effect on flies and ants.
It's happening.
And skin cancer. And
got Chris over on Forbidden Knowledge. You were over on his channel. As he says, down in Louisiana, the insects are reducing.
So I don't know what's going to happen. It could be a pandemic. There are some indications that there are some creepy new bird viruses out there and others.
Well, before we go, let's talk about this, because would we not see a mutation in these type of viruses between particularly animals and humans? I mean, I don't see anything being immune.
Yeah, that's where AIDS came from. And your so-called Morgellons was basically nematode from the earth interfacing with atmospheric bacteria that they would never have otherwise interfaced with, creating a new kind of nematode, which was called Morgellons. And the Center for Disease Control is now finally able to address some of those issues in terms of how to deal with this. Like with nematode, you can do boil the frog with tincture of wormwood.
Yeah. Now, I want to encourage people to get your survival series because, folks, I'm not a doom and gloomer, but listen, I was also a Boy Scout. Didn't make it to Eagle. I made it to Life Scout, but listen, it was well entrenched into me that being prepared is just common sense. Now,
well,
my fifth
Boy Scouts is becoming, I have a concern about that part because Wendy came up and the Girl Scouts said Girl Scout cookies, and she says they're made with real Girl Scouts. I don't know, man. I love the humor of it because it has these 38 genders. How's this working? Why? Everybody is different.
Yeah.
I'm watching Sense8. That's an eye opener. Have you seen that series?
What is it?
Sense8, where you have 8 individuals that are somehow genetically and extrasensorily connected.
Okay.
You're like part of it, not a triad, but 8.
Yeah, I can see it.
That's called Sense8. It's an interesting premise. And guess what? It's also happening because that's where all imagination starts, is with the movies. That's why they call it Hollywood, that piece of magic stick that you did wands out of. Mine is, of course, a back scratcher.
Well, I'm postulating a theory that says that our species at one time was subservient to a much higher species. And what happened was that our species gained something that we didn't have before, and that was imagination. And when our species acquired that, it changed us forever.
Well, that's why we were God's favorite. He gave us choice.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I want you back on again. I love it.
Always pleasure, no problem.
It has been fun, and I've watched the chat room here. People have just loved it. I see the discussions that feed off of what you're saying, and it's quite interesting. Anything you want to say to people before we head out of here?
Well, I could use a few book sales. Feel free, and the more you buy, the more writing I'll put out. And I have 40 manuscripts ready to go. And as I can accrue the money to publish them, they will be put online. Do not buy from anybody but me. Go to my website because
go to his website, folks.
I don't mass market. I don't put them in.
Don't go to Amazon. There's a whole situation. Go to his website. The link is there. Buy his books because I happen to like reading them. And so the more that we can buy, that means the more he can write. So I like that.
40 of them good to go. And let me tell you, the non-local mind in a holographic universe with what we were talking about.
Yeah.
That's just 3 of 10 parts of just chapter 7. And I can tell you that the magic and ritual use of metaphor is going to be a tool beyond anything. And then I have a 12-volume set called the Holistic Kabbalah with different places on the tray, with exercises and where you can actually begin doing envisions and chanting using techniques that have been proven fun for a long time. I love magic. It's gonna, in my opinion, it's the new direction in physics, learning how to use altered states as a tools in a toolbox. And over here I can guess better. Over here I can be stronger than I've ever been.
People want to know, what's the name of your YouTube channel?
I don't have that. I'll give it to you.
Stay tuned. When he gets it, I'll make a video and we'll post it up there. And
I don't know what it is. It just went up.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just the writer part of the team. I'm not even that part. All I do for the team is write and do this.
You see, folks, I consider you, Rick, one of the national treasures. I mean, I love this. I love the fact that your thought process is one that's invigorating.
Well, I'm a lead scout, and we're all there. We're all going to get there just because I'm there. I'm just a lead scout. That's why the military used me. I always was, just when you came to a fork in the road, I just.
Thank you, Fred.
I don't know, you go right because that's where it's going to go. there's some new stuff coming out now that's really interesting. The magnetic monopole stuff that they're using as a source of power is interesting.
Now that is interesting.
Yeah, there's a bunch of new directions. We are accruing so much information, even I'm having trouble kind of keeping.
You know what? I think it may be a master plan to absolutely explode us, because I think that's the problem. Psychologists are seeing it. Sociologists are seeing it. Anthropologists are seeing it. What's happening to us? We were not meant to absorb this type of information this fast, this quick, and it's causing us to go crazy.
Well, one man's crazy is another.
I know it. Listen, it's I love being in your mind. I often say this, there's no better place to be.
I love it. Tell me prayers up, Pete.
Oh, listen, folks, thank you for joining us tonight. We really gone over, but you cannot, it's impossible to do an hour show. I mean, I just don't, it's not impossible. When can we get you back on here? A couple of...
I'm good. I have some new writings I'm coming up with right this minute, and I, can talk about. We can.
When you get them done, come on back on, and we'll promote them.
I'll get back to you next week.
Okay, good. All right, folks. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Keep cool if you're in the northern hemisphere. If you're in the southern, make a snowball for me and enjoy it. We'll see you again here real soon, Monday night with the Physicist and Philosopher Hour. And of course, on Sunday, we are with Jeff Doherty, and you're not your normal Sunday. So, Rick, thank you, sir. You are a scholar and a gentleman. And may I say, I think you're reaching sainthood very quickly here.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, my friend.